Hi, friends. Welcome to the Friends of Franz podcast. In this safe space, we are favored in each episode with the presence of an expert guest from different fields and specialties as we learn about their life journeys, their successes, possible regrets, and realizations, their work, why they do what they do, and even their life outside of work. In here, we tear down common myths and misinformation with up-to-date, evidence-based science and data simplified for anyone to digest. We don't shy away from topics that can sometimes be polarizing or taboo. We normalize the humanization of healthcare and its workers, and we promote the importance of self-care and safeguarding your mental health. Please keep in mind that the conversations in this podcast are for educational and informational purposes only. They are not implied or intended to be a substitute for professional medical diagnosis, advice, or treatment. Please always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare providers regarding a medical condition. Are you ready? Let's go! Hello! How are you doing?
Doing great. How about yourself?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. I've been so excited for our talk. It's September, and I know a lot of schools start in September. So it's just right that we talk about the other ugly aspect of school for most, such as student loans and all the financial aspects. So before all of that, again, thank you for joining me. If you could just first please introduce yourself to everybody. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Well, thanks for having me. My name is Justin Jones, and I am currently in fellowship in Pediatric Critical Care Fellowship. So finished residency, spent some time as a attending, and now back in fellowship and training for critical care.
There we go. And as we get into your medical journey, we'll realize how well in tune you are with the topics that we are going to talk about today. But before all of that, just an introduction about you. Can you give us an outline of how this whole journey came about into medicine, your inspirations behind pursuing medicine as well?
Sure, absolutely. Happy to. I will say I've not really taken the traditional journey to medicine. Was never someone who medicine was the thing I was going to do. I've kind of always pursued my interests along the way to medicine and found my way there ultimately. So spent some time abroad in college, was studying something completely unrelated to medicine, studying religion actually, and found myself wanting to have practical and really tangible skills to offer to people. And so decided to look into medicine when I got back from India and living abroad, and took my pre-med courses and still wasn't sure that was what I wanted to do. The basic sciences weren't my favorite thing in the world. And so spent a couple of years as a social worker working with refugees, and then decided that I should definitely look into the route of medicine, and global health was of interest to me as well. And so decided to pursue it, and here I am along the way. And I've kind of taken a couple detours along the way, did med school, did residency, spent a couple years outside of residency, worked abroad for a year in the Pacific on an island there, and then decided to come back and do fellowship. So,
and here we are, right?
And here we are.
And through all of the highs and lows and the changes of decision, non-trad or even a traditional student, as they would say, fresh out of undergrad, I think one thing that can be true from what we hear from the narratives of many physicians who've gone through the journey is how long and arduous the whole journey is. And we'll touch more about also aside from the emotional tolls and the physical tolls as well, but the financial burdens that come with it, right? But having gone through, medical school and the residency, and then now that you're in fellowship, do you have any regrets pursuing this field? And I think I want to shed a light also on what you shared in your stories, I think today or yesterday, and what's been flaring social media the past few days is the passing of a resident, right? And I think it's this year and the past few years that we've been really hearing about the harsh conditions in medical training, residency specifically. And I wanted to get your perspective on that as someone who has gone through residency already.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And honestly, it's a hard one to answer because I think that with this journey comes a lot of sacrifice, to be honest, to be completely blunt and honest. And we miss out on a lot of things that are normal experiences for other people in the training journey. And it definitely is rigorous. And I think that there are times that I wish things were different and that I had more flexibility in my life and had more freedom to have a free schedule every weekend and that kind of thing. But then there are other times where I'm reminded of exactly why I did this therapist, and the connections that I'm able to make with patients and families. And I think that there are really, really beautiful things about being a physician and being in medicine or in healthcare in general. And I think that it's important to acknowledge those, but also not ignore that there are some really difficult parts to it as well. And, with that in mind, just being cognizant of there will be ups and downs, and knowing yourself and the things that are important to you and being willing to seek out help when you need it, I think are really important aspects of the journey.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, speaking on that, besides, like we said, the burdens of, I have friends who are residents, and I think it starts very early on, like the physical and the emotional toll that comes with it. And I can imagine for residency, right? We've been hearing, well, we've always known, but I think it's being shed to light, the the financial aspect during residency. I know people have been doing calculations, so it's like minimum wage, but there's like 80 to 100 work weeks, especially decades before, and sleepless nights on calls. You must have a lot of family gatherings or friend gatherings and holidays and all of that. But I think one thing that you can't really separate foremost in the medical education, especially in the United States, is the whole financial aspect. And even outside of medicine, it's just, I feel like just going to school here in the United States, it's just synonymous to having student loans, right? Student debt. And according to the American Debt Statistics, in a survey they did in March of 2021, 80% of Americans are in debt, totaling up to a collective amount of $14 trillion. And most of that is mortgage, but $2 trillion of that 14 is allocated to just student loans for both undergraduate and graduate students in all faculties and in all disciplines. And we know that healthcare, for some reason, I don't know if you've seen, there's this post that came out on Instagram where it talked about the top 20 student loans by profession. It's like the first 5 were like different fields of dentistry, and then the rest are like physician or physician assistant or nurse practitioner or other doctorate programs in healthcare, right? And I know someone in dental school who has loans at their graduation totaling up to $500,000.
Wow.
So it's definitely a pressing issue here in the United States that might not be true to other countries. And as a financial educator that I truly respect, and I learned so much from your post, I wanted to get your introspection on the whole aspect of student loans, specifically for the medical school journey. I just want to know, like, did you take out loans for medical school? And how does that work, like going through residency, where the general resident may not be enough to meet the gravity of those student loans?
Yeah, I definitely have student loans. I have over $200,000 in student loans personally. And the average amount for a physician is around $200,000, which is a significant amount. And I think the reality of residency is when you're in training, just making sure that you're keeping up to date and at least paying the minimum. And for some people, the minimum is zero, and it depends on your income and what type of payment program you're in, but making sure that you're paying the minimum. And I think something that a lot of people don't realize, and I know we'll get into this later, but public service loan forgiveness is a big thing that we hear a lot about currently, and people are talking a lot about, and there's some changes coming too. And I think a lot of people don't realize, for many people in academic institutions or in nonprofit institutions, which are doing training in those institutions, the time that you're in residency and working in residency counts towards that forgiveness if you were working for a nonprofit or for a government agency. And so I think just making sure that you're staying on top of your paperwork, that you're making sure you're keeping up with your payments if at all possible, and kind of recognizing that you're going to have to do a little bit of planning and coming up with a plan as to how you're going to tackle it once you get out. But I think in residency, it's do the best you can, make the payments you can make, and make sure you're on track and come up with a plan for how you're going to deal with it once you get out.
Yeah, definitely. And when we talk about student loans, it's such a great and vague term, right? But we know, like, there's a lot of specifics when it comes to student loans, because there's different types of loans that many students take out, right? We have like direct subsidized or unsubsidized loans, or plus loans or private loans. I just wanted to get an aspect of each, if you could explain, especially for pre-med or pre-health students who may be entering this field, and high school is free for most people, but now that they're entering college, especially now it's September season, and they're seeing all of their financial breakdowns and their tuition, like, what the heck did I get myself into?
Yeah, it's really confusing. There's a lot of jargon and terminology around student loans, and it's super overwhelming and super confusing. And I think to break it down, essentially, when you're looking at direct subsidized or direct unsubsidized loans, essentially what that means is the government paying on your interest while you are in school. And unsubsidized loans are available to everyone. Graduate school, they're available to everyone regardless of financial need, whereas subsidized loans, they're based on financial need and they're only available to undergraduate. And so if you have a subsidized loan, that means the government is paying the interest for you while you're in school and for up to 6 months after school during your grace period. And for the rest of us who are in graduate school or who don't have unsubsidized or who, don't have subsidized loans, that interest is accruing throughout the time that you're in school. And so from the moment it's dispersed to you to the time you get it paid off, that interest is accruing. And I think that that's one big problem with the student loan system as a whole, right? The interest is ridiculous, 6-7% in some cases. And so it's a really high interest type of loan for something that, is in many ways the only way that people can afford higher education. And then when it comes to plus loans, those are loans that essentially are for people who have reached the limit of what they can be loaned. So each type of student loan has a max amount that can be loaned per year. And then if you need more financial assistance beyond that, the plus loan is where that comes in. And parents can take that out, or graduate students can take that out. And you have to, in many cases, kind of have a credit approval process. And that is also accruing interest. Those plus loans are accruing interest throughout the time that you're in school, and they're often a little bit higher interest than some of the other type of loans. And then there's private loans, which are, loans that are from the private sector, not federal loans altogether. And so that's kind of a little bit of a breakdown on the different types of loans out there.
Yeah, I mean, looking at it like on the bird's eye view, it sounds so overwhelming, especially when we focus on the word. I mean, I think for each one that we talked about, it's like interest, right? And basically you're in school and you're studying hard, and then in the background, all of this like percentages like increasing and incurring and just accumulating. And I guess specifically for like medical school, once you got out of medical school and you're in residency, all of the interest is incurring as well. And that's why we hear so many physicians who are like, I paid this much and then I still haven't paid it off because I was basically just paying the interest that accumulated, right? And actually for the second episode of the second season of this podcast, Dr. Kate, who's a neonatologist, she was talking about how, I forgot which type of loan, but she was paying it off for the past like so many years she's been attending. And if you look at her statements, almost still the same.
Yeah.
When she was starting out of school because of the interest.
It's unbelievable.
But if you look at it, it's like, oh my gosh, like this whole loan system is like a scam, right? It's like literally like a trap that's like, you feel like you can never overcome it, right? And I guess for many students, that's how it feels. Yes, definitely there's students who can afford to pay in graduate school, or who may have parents who pay their graduate education, or they can afford it themselves. But I think the story for many is that many are kind of trapped in these contracts and this loans and all this loan details. How would one go about repaying this, what seems to be like such a huge mountain that you can't see the other side of, right?
Yeah, it's incredibly overwhelming. And I think that having an idea, if we're talking specifically about people in the field of medicine, having an idea of where you see your career trajectory going. So if you're going to be in, for example, a high paying specialty, you're going to be in a subsurgical specialty that's going to be paying, really well when you get out, then in some cases, and again, I should put a disclaimer out here for all of this. I'm an educator, not a financial advisor. It's none of this is personal financial advice, but just speaking generally to the topic. So, if you're someone who's going to be earning a lot of money when you get out of residency or fellowship, it might make sense to, attack that loan aggressively when you get out and just pay it off as quickly as possible. That might be your best way of doing it. But if you're going to be someone who is going to be working, in a primary care specialty or in many subspecialties of pediatrics, which are lower paying than many of the other subspecialties out there, it might be worth looking into loan forgiveness programs. And this goes for people who are not in medicine as well. There are, many types of loan programs out there that will help with repayment or even provide scholarships while you're in school to help kind of ease that loan burden as you go through school if you're willing to work in an underserved area. And so I think kind of being aware of the options and as well as your career trajectory and where you see yourself going. And I think one thing that you hear a lot about is refinancing your student loans. You'll hear people talk about refinancing their student loans to a private lender. And I think that in some cases that can be really beneficial because the interest rate gets much lower in most cases than the
Can you
federal
explain
rate.
that for those who may not know what refinancing is?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically you have your federal student loans, and if you say you're paying 6-7% interest on that, there are many cases where you can take those federal student loans and refinance them or have another lender take them over. And in the private sector, not the federal sector, in the private sector, and you can have your interest rate be much lower. And so if you're someone who's going to be attacking that student loan balance aggressively and trying to pay it off on your own, then that might be something that would be a benefit to you. However, I think it's really important to acknowledge that does come with drawbacks because, for example, the people who have done that didn't get the advantage of having the COVID forbearance that the federal student loans have, or won't benefit from the student loan forgiveness that Biden just kind of instituted. And so there are definitely drawbacks. And I think also when it comes to private student loans, recognizing that in most cases with death and disability, they're not discharged, not all cases, but most cases. And so your family might be stuck paying on those things if something happens to you. Yeah. Whereas with federal student loans, in the event of permanent disability or death, usually those loans are forgiven. And so just understanding the nuances and the caveats associated with each of the routes that you take, I think is really important.
It's no longer October, but let me tell you a horror story. I was working bedside as a nurse. 12-hour shifts, 12,000 to 15,000 steps per night, always exposed to dripping blood, pee, and other fluids. And guess what? I was wearing skateboarding shoes for almost a year. Because my feet were killing me, I switched to more comfortable sneakers, but had to go through 3 pairs because I would find new stains after shifts. And over time, as the pandemic came, I was too exhausted to think about my feet or even changing my footwear. I was then introduced to Clove, and I no longer had to do the thinking. To support the steps of those who dedicate their lives to caring for others, Clove collaborated with healthcare professionals and innovative designers to create a shoe that prioritizes the needs of those in the front line. These are sneakers designed for healthcare. They already did the thinking. Easy to clean and fluid repellent, I no longer have to worry about those red streaks or pee-soaked socks since I use the same wipes at work to remove every stain. Just this summer, one of my patients unexpectedly bled from the radial artery access site and made a pool of my brilliant whites on the floor. A few swipes with the purple wipes, all clean and with no damage. Plus being squeak-free, I no longer have to worry about waking up a sleeping patient. Layered with comfort, sore toes are no longer my problem since the shoes are now upgraded with double the cushioning, 50% more arch support, and a perfect heel pad. On top of this, the grippiest outsole also allows for a fluid channel technology while maintaining super secure footing. And yes, it's 100% cruelty-free and vegan. I love all of my Clove shoes, and I hope that you can get ready to also step into your perfect pair. Use code FRANZ, that's F-R-A-N-Z, or visit goclove.com/Franz for 15% off your first pair of Clove shoes at checkout. I am no stranger to seeing patients that can't get the care they need because they can't afford it. Even if they get a medical recommendation that will help them, oftentimes, medication costs are so high it's totally out of reach, or they would have to choose between feeding their family or paying rent in order to get the medication, so people have to go without. After living through a pandemic, on some level, we all know the healthcare system in the United States is broken. That is why I am happy to see that mission-driven businesses are now taking an interest in the problem, because it's not getting solved fast enough. Better Remedies is one of those companies doing something to really meaningfully help people with medical expenses, in particular, getting their medications. Better makes over-the-counter medication, think pain, gas, cough and flu, sleep, all the essentials for your medicine cabinet. For every box of Better Remedies sold, they cover the cost of someone's life-saving medication for a month. and this is someone who would otherwise have to choose between food, rent, gas to get to work, or otherwise caring for themselves or their family. It is such an easy switch to make. You get the same great relief you need for 10% less than other big name brands, and someone who doesn't have the access to their meds will get the help they need. In general, it's good to know the active ingredient you need for your symptoms rather than just buying a big name brand. It'll save you money, and because active ingredients are FDA regulated, you'll still be getting the results you need. Plus, if you buy from Better, you are also helping someone else in a big way too. It's putting your headaches, farts, and insomnia to work. And that's something we can all feel better about. I've been buying my Better Remedies products at Walmart at any time I need to stock up, and you can do the same. Everything is priced about 10% less than the big brands, works just as well, and makes an impact on something that is really important and that I am personally very passionate about. Make the switch next time you need relief. You'll feel better and be doing some good.
And when you're talking about public service loan forgiveness, I think I was going through Twitter 1 month ago, I guess, and someone posted, it was like, I woke up and my student loan balance is zero. Forgot what's the amount, but she was like, am I dreaming? And she's a attending physician of many years now. And so it seems like this magic, they just take the magic eraser and just erases it. And I know you touched upon this earlier, and I think what people have in mind is the number of 10 years, like 10 years, 10 years, 10 years. Can you explain what PSLF is for everybody?
Yeah, absolutely. So public service loan forgiveness is essentially a program through the federal government that offers forgiveness of your student loans if you meet certain criteria. The most important aspect of that is that you have to be working for a qualifying employer, a nonprofit, a government agency, something along those lines. So working for a qualifying employer, and in most cases, you have to be in a qualifying repayment program. So that's an income-driven repayment program. Those payments are the types of payments that will count if you're working towards a qualifying employer. So once you make 120 payments, 10 years of payments, working for a qualified employer, making the right type of payments, you also have to have the right type of loans. So you have to have direct loans through the direct program. So if you don't have those, you might have to consolidate into a direct loan. Making sure that you meet those criteria, then your loans will be forgiven after you've made payments for 10 years.
And I think a few questions that got into my DMs are asking about the PSLF, and they were asking if plus loans and private loans were included in the forgiveness.
Yeah, that's a really good question. To my knowledge, plus loans are not included. I think you have to consolidate to a direct loan. Don't quote me on that. I'm pretty sure they're not included though. And then private loans are definitely not included. Private loans definitely are not. But the plus loans, I would have to double check. But I'm almost sure that you have to consolidate into a direct loan in order to get that balance forgiven.
Yeah. I feel like private loans and there's some who take credit card loans, credit card debt as well. It's like the devil of all devils when it comes to loans, right? Especially for school. And I know many use credit cards as well, like to get books or whatnot that may not, if they have already met the cap of their student loans. Yeah, I mean, it talks about student loans, and I just see this unseen heavy toll of that. And I guess that's true for many health students, right? Pre-health students is, like I said, I know someone in dental school who has like $500,000 of debt. I know people who just finished NP or PA school also in the 6 figures of debt, and physical therapy as well for the doctorate programs. And I think stepping away from that field of student loans is, obviously you make the minimum payments as much as you can and you try to pay it off. And then life happens, right? Emergencies happen. And there's people who like are very aggressive with their loan payments, right? And then there's nothing left for emergencies, right? For those rainy days, for those stormy days. And I think included in our list of questions, because I received a lot of questions on it, is when it comes to saving in the face of debt, whether it be student loan debt or if people have high amounts of credit card debt or other types of debt. How do you facilitate in your mind and in a general sense of how to mix saving and making these payments for these debt? Like, should you not save and just put all of your money into paying these off, Or is there a healthy balance of both? How does that work in the face of that? How does savings work or should work, do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think maybe it's a question of financial priorities. And the way that I kind of approach this question is kind of stepwise. One, if you are working for an employer that offers a 401k match, you should contribute to your 401k that's investing for your future at least up to the amount that your employer matches. So if they're matching 3% of your paycheck, then you should contribute at least 3% of your paycheck or 6% or whatever that number is, because that's free money. You're getting free money invested. It's a one-to-one match.
Yeah.
After that, I think the priority should be your emergency fund. And the reason that I say that is because when it comes to emergencies, if you don't have an emergency fund, then you are at higher risk of having to take out more debts in order to pay for emergencies. And I think that a lot of people feel overwhelmed and like, well, I don't know where to get this money. I don't know how much to put there. The general recommended guidance is 3 to 6 months of savings in an emergency fund. Now, you're not going to get there overnight. And so setting a small goal, even if it's, this year I want to get $1,000 in my emergency fund. If you put aside $80 a month into a high yield savings account, you can do it. And so setting small reachable goals, I think setting unreachable goals is just discouraging. And so setting reachable small goals that kind of move you forward in that direction is really important. And then after your emergency fund, I would say all debt is not equal. And so high interest debt, like credit card debt, that's 17, 20%, you need to tackle that aggressively because that interest adds up and is a huge hindrance to you being able to reach financial independence in the future. And then I would say that after that, if you have money that you can put aside, even if it's $20 a month into something to invest in a Roth IRA or depending on where you are in your investment journey, your income journey, whatever accounts you have available to you, if you can put, just a little bit, even if it's a small amount, that amount adds up. And then after that comes your low interest debts. And I use low interest loosely. I think it depends on who you talk to, but I would say anything less than 7%, I would consider low interest personally. There are different people who think differently. And the reason that I say that is because on average, over the course of time, not every year, if you're looking at the stock market right now, this is not what you will see, but over the course of time, the stock market returns on average somewhere around the 7 to 10% range every year annualized. And so if you're able to have money in there, it will grow beyond that interest essentially that you would be losing, if that makes sense. And so you're kind of getting a return on your investment that's a little bit higher than the return on investment you might get putting it towards that. But again, recognizing that investing, it's a long game. It's not something you're going to be able to do overnight and get wealthy overnight per se. But time is really, really, really important when it comes to investing. So even small amounts, if you have 25 years, 30 years to invest small amounts, then that grows and it matters. So I don't know if that answers your question directly.
Definitely.
Hopefully you get an idea of where to go.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because I think it's like a matter of also like trying to facilitate, right? Like where your money goes. And I guess also like knowing that there's families who may be of a socioeconomic status where it's really paycheck to paycheck, and there's debt that's involved in the financial matters because they had to take it. There was an emergency and there's really no funds to save, right? Like in face of that, like how do you like maneuver your money, like when the paycheck comes, right? Do I save? Do I pay the debt? Or and I agree with like when it comes to the interest rates, because I know there's like credit card rates that goes up to like 27% interest per month, right? And the balance that's added to the balance that's there based on interest is not just based on what you purchased on a given statement month, but also the balance that was already existing there. So it's like there's basically like two different values that's added to your payment every month, and it grows every time. And as your balance grows, the monthly minimum payment grows as well, and maybe harder to meet the demands monthly. Yeah, it's generally I find it so. And I know my friends in Europe and in different countries in Asia always laugh at me for being in America because they're like, that is a very kind of like intricate part of any country, but it's kind of like an epidemic in the United States, right? And it's like many countries in households and familial factions or even individual factions. It's like they don't have these problems of like this gross amount of debt and the percentage of the interest that's incurred with it, right? So it's kind of like, oh my gosh, what is America going through? It's like what is this? And I think that brings to like, you know, many people's questions of, do I save? How do I budget? And I think I want to touch back on what you were talking about with the 401k and or contributing to a Roth IRA. You know, you were talking about saving for emergency funds or saving just to save, and then there's saving for retirement, right? And I would like for you to explain, if you can, like the difference, you know, 401k, 403b, traditional versus Roth IRA. But also a question that came into my DMs as well was, how important is saving for retirement with these funds? Like someone even sent me, I should have sent you a screenshot of it. They were like, if tomorrow is not promised, why do I even have to save up for the future? And I'll leave that to you.
Yeah, so that's a great question.
Yeah.
So I want to, before I address that, I want to go back to something that you said. I think it is really important to acknowledge, as you said, that there are people who have no option but live paycheck to paycheck. And I think that when it comes to personal finance and talking about money, there's often a lot of shame associated with not being able to do certain things like pay off debt quickly or not being able to, you know, or having credit card debt or not being able to invest or whatever the case may be. And so when you hear people talking about, this is what you should be doing with your money, this is what you should, you know, this is where you should go, this is how you should do it. I think it's really important to recognize you can only do the best that you can do. And if you are in a place where you are living to paycheck, or if you're in a place where you know, made some decisions in the past that have led you to be in a significant amount of debt or had no option but to be in a significant amount of debt, there shouldn't be any shame associated with that. And all we can do is learn, grow, and do our best to move forward. And so I think it's really important that we acknowledge that we can only do the best we can. And shame is a really poor motivator. And so being able to step away and separate ourselves from that shame and move forward is really important. But to the question about, should I save for retirement when tomorrow isn't promised? I think that's valid. The world seems somewhat bleak right now, right? We're always hearing something awful on the news. I would say that your future self will regret not saving for retirement, because I think one of the biggest things that people don't understand about investing and saving for retirement is that time is one of the most important factors. And so if you start, you know, investing at say 30 years old and, you know, put say $200 a month in, you know, that $200 over the course of a month over the course of 30 years, and hopefully as your income grows, you can start putting more, will add up to a significant amount. Whereas if you don't start investing until you're 45, you're going to have to start putting way more money into investments and in order to grow it, in order to be prepared for retirement. And so I think compound interest is the term that you might hear people use, is really overlooked and misunderstood oftentimes. And so people feel like, man, I just don't have a lot of money to put towards investing. Even a little bit over a long period of time can go a very long way. And if you want to just play with some numbers, type in compound interest calculator. There's Bankrate. I think the government also has a compound interest calculator that you can just play with numbers, and you can see the power of time in growing your money. And I think it's really important to recognize that small amounts over a long period of time can go a very long way. And I think that it's something that, you know, while the future does look bleak, I hope that we're all here in 30 years and we're able to enjoy our lives and be able to live in freedom with the money that we put aside. And I think it's really important to plan for that.
Having worked as a nurse in cardiac surgery recovery and outpatient interventional cardiology, I learned that listening is a vital part of the field. But beyond listening to what patients say, it's also important to hear what they don't say. And many times, you can hear this in the stillness and quietness of the room as their chest thumps in rhythms that can range from normalcy to urgency. A person's heartbeat is not only a sign of life, but also a sign of its quality. According to the CDC, arrhythmias, or abnormal heart sounds, have an expected prevalence of about 1.5% in the general population, with atrial fibrillation being the most common. This is why it is so important that we can adequately hear and detect heart and even lung sounds that may be detrimental to human life. Echo provides smart digital stethoscopes, such as the 3M Littman Core digital stethoscope, that help you check for signs of heart and lung disease in seconds during physical exams with unprecedented enhanced stethoscope sound and automated detection. This is all through a quick pairing with your mobile device. This is made possible by features such as having up to 40 times amplification, active noise cancellation, wireless listening, auto-triggered heart murmur and atrial fibrillation detection, and real-time visualization of sound and ECG that you can share as a consult with a trusted colleague or specialist. Every patient encounter deserves exceptional care. Hear clearly and care confidently with Echo. The virtual space is flooded with so many different brands, resources, and gears made for healthcare workers from all disciplines. From scrubs to pins and even compression socks, it can truly get overwhelming trying to find the best product fit for you. Links to these items can get lost, and the list can get so long that you forget what you actually needed to purchase for your next work shift. This is why I am so grateful to partner with Lumify, the community marketplace for healthcare workers all in one app. Finding the brands you love, discovering new tools, and accessing your resources and communities shouldn't be difficult. Instead of going to 50 different websites to access what you need, you can find it all on Lumify, where over 200 brands, organizations, and resources are united with one goal: to support healthcare workers. As a nurse-founded company, Lumify believes that all healthcare professionals deserve a trusting and supportive community of their peers. In Lumify, you can easily communicate with your peers to trade advice, share product recommendations, and discuss what resources are best to support you. You can even earn Lumify points on every purchase you complete, which you can save for product discounts. Whether it's mental health resources, or fluid-resistant shoes, hi Chloe, or stethoscopes, hi Echo, or podcast, welcome to Franz and Franz, Lumify is trusted by over 75,000 healthcare professionals at the bedside and beyond, including myself. Enter this new healthcare ecosystem where you can get 10% off using the code LumifyFranz, that's LUMIFYFRANZ, at lumifycare.com or the Lumify app available for download on iOS devices. It's a one-stop shop, and I hope you drop by.
It's hard, right? I think one of the questions I wanted to ask you was, why is financial literacy so important? Is because of things like these, right? It's such a confusing sector in life, like whole financial aspect. You know, Capital One did a survey, I think, a few years ago, where they asked a group of people what's the cost of their stresses in daily life, and 70 or 75% said it's finances, and it's true. I mean, even if you are not living with paycheck to paycheck, there's people, have families who have to support for their families, or for you, or you want to go into higher education, right? Stuff like that. And I think if you have the capacity, right, making those choices to even put in just a little for the future that may not be even guaranteed or insured, it's like, you're right, those small steps, it helps a lot. And it also builds a framework as well, like mentally as well, right? Like there's a sense of, even though time may not be of assurance, it's like there's a sense of assurance within yourself that, okay, maybe I can look forward to something. And we've seen this through the pandemic of how the whole world was shaken up, and how people's daily life was shaken up, right? Like obviously there's the small businesses that unfortunately many have gone, right? Because they couldn't meet the demands well, of all of the costs and of that during lockdowns and stuff like that. And people as well, people may not have been able to go to work. Yes, there were unemployment assistance, but in a sense, they could only go through so much, right? And I think a question that came into a lot of people's minds were like the aspect of life insurance, right? How beneficial do you think, or profitable do you think it is to put something monthly? I think it also is also within the area of the questions of retirement plans as well, right? Is how beneficial do you think it is to invest every month to an insurance to a life that is not inherently insured every day.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when it comes to insurance, the point of insurance is to be able to provide for your family should something awful and catastrophic happen, right? And I think this is all the more, coming back to student loans, this is all the more important if you have someone who is co-signed on your student loans, like your parents or a partner who is co-signed on student loans that might be left with the responsibility of taking care of your student loans should you unfortunately pass away. And so I think that when it comes to life insurance, term life insurance, you'll hear lots of different terms around life insurance, and it can get really confusing. But I think for most people, term life insurance is more than sufficient. And a policy for term life insurance that will be comfortable for your family should you pass away. If you're young and healthy and you start thinking about that now and start getting a policy now, it's a small amount every month. I don't know, $30 a month is something I'm throwing out there. And you can go to something like policygenius.com or whatever and look at different rates, but it's actually a pretty small amount of a monthly contribution in order to kind of cover you for however long that term is. And the point of insurance is to cover you until you get to financial independence, right? So if you are working hard and making smart financial choices, whenever that financial independence time comes for you and you're able to provide for yourself should you not be able to work, then you don't need insurance anymore. And so it's really kind of a stopgap to get you to the point of financial independence. And so I do think it's something that's really important. I think it's really, while we're talking about this, really important to also be aware that people who are in healthcare are often high income earners, and there are people out there who will try to take advantage of people in healthcare because they're high income earners and try to sell life insurance as an investment. And I think it's really important to be a bit wary of thinking of life insurance as an investment. Those types of policies are often very expensive. Whenever someone is trying to sell you life insurance as an investment, you should ask them how they're getting paid. Are they getting a commission off of selling you this policy? And I won't say that there's no place for anyone in the world to have a whole life insurance policy, but for the vast majority of people, term life insurance is more than sufficient. And again, it's just there as a stopgap to protect your family in case you aren't able to be there to provide and help. And so, or the short answer, yes, I think it is important. I think it's really important.
Yeah, definitely. And what we've been talking about is, tackling things that are already existent, in the sense that we talked about, okay, we have student loans, we're going to tackle it. Retirement plans, okay, let's tackle that. Life insurance, let's tackle that. But I want to step away for a second from tackling things that's already there and existent, like interest and the loans that's there. But like step back, I think going back to that moment of someone still trying to, specifically for medicine, entering this field and seeing this like map in front of them of the incurring amount of loan and debt and interest, and going back to what we were talking about in the beginning is the medical journey, aside from the whole mental and emotional aspect of the work and the rigor of the curriculum and the training itself, but specifically for the United States, and I'm saying this because we know of countries who this is not a problem for them, but the amount of loans that one has to take, again, and the interest, and you go through residency and you just, you try your best, and then we hear this term of even after residency, you live like a resident for a few more years, right? There is a high school student or a child whose biggest dream is to become a physician. But there's just this big and huge roadblock of this financial aspect of now questions in their mind of, is it worth taking this path when I'll be imbued with so much debt that will, last for years? I mean, you're basically sacrificing the primordial years of your early adulthood, and this whole financial toll. Is it still worth it for someone whose passion may be medicine, but it's is it worth it with this amount of financial burden?
It's a good question, and it's not an easy one to answer. I think it's
Yeah.
really person dependent, and I would say that, if there are other fields that you think you could be just as happy in, and end up with a different type of life and less debt and that type of thing, I would seriously consider those. But if you are, if this is the thing you want, and this is for sure the direction you want to go, and this has been your dream your whole life, then I wouldn't be one to say you shouldn't do it just because of the student debt. But I do think that you should definitely keep that in mind as a reality, and
Yeah.
as something that you're going to have to think about and work through. And it might be worth looking into what type of programs are available. Some people go through the military, some people
Yeah.
work through National Health Service Corps and get kind of a scholarship through that and have
Yeah.
their loans taken care of through
There's
that. So
pre-medical schools now too. Yeah.
yeah, so just looking at the options available to you, and I would say that for any student who is entering this journey, take out as few loans as you possibly
Mhm.
can. If you are able to get, and again, I recognize that not everyone is in this
Yeah.
boat, but if you're able to get help from family, if you
Yeah.
are able to, find other ways to fund that without taking out that student
Or
debt,
take a
then
few gap years to save money, maybe.
or that, then whatever you can
Yeah.
whatever you can do to, on the other side, find yourself being comfortable with the amount of debt that you have, and the journey that you're on. I think it's something
Yeah.
to consider.
Yeah. And as a final thing is going back to that 70% of people according to the survey, the daily stresses is finances. And like we said, 80% of Americans do have that. And, definitely someone is feeling just drowning and underwater with the amount of debt and whatever sphere that is, student loan or credit card debt. As a financial educator, what would be your one piece of hope, advice, or something to someone who's struggling because of finances? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a huge stressor, and I would
Yeah.
just say don't give up. You can absolutely do this. I think that money doesn't have to be complicated. I think that it seems really overwhelming and complex, but really just a few small principles go such a long way.
Yeah.
And so grab a book, read a book. One I really like is I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ronit Sethi. It's a really great framework. Or The Broke Millennial is also a really great book. Follow some financial educators online, and just a little bit of education could go a long way, and you can absolutely make your way out of that. People have done this time and time again.
Yeah.
And I think it's just a matter of looking at the big picture, readjusting some things, and coming up with a plan, and persevering and tackling it, because it's absolutely doable. I don't want to minimize that it's stressful.
Yeah.
I don't want to minimize that that is overwhelming.
Definitely.
Those are not things that I want to in any way minimize, but I do want to offer hope that it's absolutely something that you can learn and do and be successful at.
This is such an important talk, and it's just a very helpful one, and I think it's super important because, like you said, money can be so complicated, and especially when clouded with things like loans and, like you said, September, school starting, like student loans, and people living from paycheck to paycheck, or so many responsibilities. So it's just so important to have financial literacy, because it also helps to eliminate that shame that we were talking about, right? Like, we just do our best, right? And thank you for shedding a light on that. And I learned so much, and it's such a pleasure. I know so many people will learn as well, and have learned as well, for those who tuned in. And thank you so much
thanks
for
for having me.
joining me. I'm so
wonderful
happy
to finally
that
meet you online. It's
I know.
wonderful. Thank you so much.
I know, yeah. I'm such a huge fan of your work and all of your posts, and thank you for all the education you do online. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I really hope it's helpful to people, and if I can, if there's anyone out there that's just like, I feel really overwhelmed, and you need a word of hope, feel free to shoot me a message, and I'll try to give you some encouragement. So you can do it.
Thank you so much for your time. I hope you have a great rest of the night there. I'm so jealous of you being all the way on the other side, and here it's getting colder.
Let's hang out. It'd be good.
Yes, I will. Have a good night. Thank you so
All right,
much.
see ya.
Bye.
We have now reached the end of the story. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Friends of Franz. I hope you had an enjoyable adventure learning about our expert guest, their work, and why they do the things that they do. Please check out the rest of the series available on all podcast platforms. Please also consider following the podcast on the platform that you prefer, turn on the alerts for new episodes so you don't miss new stories, and give us a rating to support the show. You can find more updates on the podcast's official Instagram at Friends of Franz Pod, or my personal Instagram at Chris Franz. That's without the I, because there is no I in team. I'm kidding. Someone already took the username. Have a great day or night, everybody!